As the anniversary is coming out, I wanted to make a Dead by Daylight chapter tier list. Uh, I'm just going to rank all the chapters now. The criteria for my rankings, I'm going to prioritize the killer itself. I think will be the main deciding factor. Then it will be the perks, and then it will be the map. So, for example, if a chapter came out with a really good killer, a really good map, and good perks across the board, that will be like in the absolute top tier. Um, Chapters will get like no points for not adding a map, but chapters will get negative points for adding a bad map. Because I would rather get no map than a bad map. But chapters will get bonus points for adding a good map. So let's start. So the last breath, which added, I'll just put it here for now. The nurse, Crotus Pran, and Nia. Nurse is not the worst thing added to the game. She definitely bottlenecks balance quite a lot, but at the same time, the game kind of needs Nurse because while she does break the game, uh, to deal with the top level survivors, you need to break the game as killer. So I think Nurse kind of has to be in the game. We need Nurse, let's be honest. If Nurse wasn't in the game, behavior would kind of have to mega Nurse because otherwise killers would just not be able to deal. Crotus Pren, Disturbed Ward, is not a balanced map, but it's not my least favorite map. I don't mind it. It's not bad for killers like Blight, or Oni, some killers, but as a weaker killer, you definitely feel it. As for the perks, they used to be pretty good back in the day. Balanced Landing was really strong, but brokenly strong in some maps, which would have been, a negative. Uh, Thanatophobia at its peak was okay. Nurse's Calling used to be useful back in the day. But nowadays, the perks of this chapter are pretty shit. So overall, I'm gonna put Last Breath in kinda bad because the map isn't very good. The perks across the board these days are pretty shit, and Nurse just isn't the best designed killer. So I'm gonna put her in kinda bad. Next is Halloween. Now this chapter did add, obviously Michael Myers, which is huge. But I think for this list, I'm going to try and be as objective as possible and ignore the fact that, Michael Myers is obviously just like an amazing license to have. I'm going to go purely off the gameplay elements. And if we look at Halloween purely off the gameplay elements, the map was horrible and still is. The killer sucks. He's really weak. He's got some stupid add-ons. He's just not fun to play. And the perks, for the most part, are pretty shit, except for DS and Save the Best for Last. So I'm gonna be honest, like Halloween, Halloween was a really bad chapter. Like it's lucky it's Halloween, but if you, I don't, I'm gonna get a lot of shit for this, but if you like take away the license factor and you look at it purely from a gameplay element, Halloween was a terrible chapter. It was awful. Like granted, it was literally one of the first DLCs, so I'm not like bashing on it because I mean it was like one of the first ones. It's not obviously going to be a perfect chapter, but despite Haddonfield getting a rework, it's still a terrible map. Myers is just terrible. Despite being in the game for all these years, he still hasn't received a decent buff. And once again, the perks. See, the best for last is decent in some killers, and DS is good. But at its worst, DS was horrible. But I think nowadays DS is good. So I'm gonna put it in the kind of bad. I just don't think it's a very good chapter. Of Flesh and Mud, we got Hag, we got Ace, and we got the swamp maps. The swamp maps are terrible. They're not the worst maps in the game once again, but they're ugly to look at. They have really bad collision issues, and they're overall just not very balanced. Hag is a pretty disliked killer, and I'm not a big fan of Hag either. Ace's perks are pretty dog shit. Hag's perks used to be quite favorable, but nowadays Ruin's pretty shit. Third Seal shit. Devar Hope is way too inconsistent to even consider. Yeah, this chapter, I wouldn't put it in the horrible tier because I don't think it makes the game like actively worse. Swamp isn't just this horrible map that I hate so much. It's no Garden of Joy, and Hag isn't like the most unfun killer to go against. And you know what? I will say, even though she's not my cup of tea, Hag is not a terribly designed killer, even though she has her issues. But yeah, I think I'll keep him at the bottom of kind of bad. But yeah, this chapter also wasn't really good. Now that I think about it, the earlier chapters were actually pretty shit. Alright, Left Behind, this is just Bill. He added some decent perks, we just put it meh. It didn't really make the game any better, it didn't make any worse, but if you're a fan of Left 4 Dead, I guess it was cool. Spark of Madness. Mm, Doctor is okay. He's better than he used to be. His perks are decent. Modern Abuse isn't too bad. Overcharge recently got nerfed, but it's still not a terrible perk. It's okay-ish. Larry's I hate, though it is kind of necessary, I guess. Larry's the only reason I hate Larry's is because I play a lot of Blight and Oni, and obviously that's a shit map for them. So naturally, I'm just going to hate Larry's. But it's not a terrible map for some other killers. And Fang brought some decent perks. You know what? I'll put Spark of Madness in the top of meh. It's an alright chapter. The killers are on the weaker side. The perks aren't the best, and the map, I despise it too much. I don't think Dead by Daylight's built for indoor maps. It just doesn't really work for a lot of killer powers. So I will put it in meh. But it could easily be indecent. But personally, my dislike of Larry's, I'm gonna put it in meh. Lullaby for the Dark. That brought Huntress, David, and Mother's Dwelling. Huntress is good, really good killer, so she definitely brings this chapter up a lot. Mother's Dwelling is a terrible map though. I thought the rework behavior would go and fix it. They ended up making it worse. I don't know how you make Mother's Dwelling worse. Like Jesus, how out of touch do you have to be? But it is. The perks. Dead Hard was the most disgusting, horrible thing ever added to the game for like the longest, for nearly 7 years. Only recently has it become, in my opinion, a fairly balanced perk. Um, and Huntress's perks suck. Ooh, I mean, I think I'll put it in decent just because Mother's Dwelling isn't a completely irredeemable map. And as long as you're not going against a really good team, it's not like the worst thing to play on. It's not like Larry's, where Larry's can be really boring. Even if like you win and you're playing a killer like Hillbilly on Larry's, it's just not fun. Whereas Mother's Dwelling, you can still have fun on it. Huntress is a good killer, and I guess Dead Hard is a decent perk now. We're gonna live forever as well, so yeah, I think I'll put Huntress in the decent category. This chapter was okay. Although if the Mother's Dwelling rework made it better, I would definitely be a lot more confident put it in decent, but I think I will put it in decent. Leatherface, I'll put it in the meh tier. It doesn't really. It just added Leatherface, who brought some decent perks, and he's an okay-ish killer nowadays. But it didn't add a map, didn't add a survivor, so I'll just put it in meh. Not much to say there. Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, is going to be in the first horrible tier. Freddy was terrible at release. At his peak, he was a strong but pretty uninteractive killer, and now he's just a weak but uninteractive killer. Bottom is terrible. The perks were ass. Yeah, this was just not a good chapter at all. The game, honestly, aside from the fact that it's Freddy Krueger as a license, the game would generally be just better off without this killer, without those maps, and the perks are just not much to talk about there. Yeah, it's a bad chapter. It's definitely one of the worst that they added. Next is Saw. I don't really like the pig, and I don't like Gideon Meat Plant, and I don't really like any of the perks that were added. Surveillance is okay, Make Your Choice is okay. Tap's perks are pretty niche. I just hate the meat plant, and I don't like pig as a killer. Uh, I put it at the bottom of meh just because I feel like if I'm looking at it a bit more objectively, pig isn't the worst design killer. She's not. She's decent to go against. You could probably have fun playing her. I just don't enjoy her. But the meat plant is just currently just a really bad map. I hate playing on it. So yeah, I'll put it in meh. Low. I mean, if I was being a bit more personal, I would probably put it in like the bottom of kind of bad because I just really don't like that map. Curtain Call. I might get a bit. Yeah, people aren't going to like me for this, but I'm actually going to put it in decent. I actually think Curtain Call was a pretty good chapter. Father Campbell's Chapel used to be one of the best maps. It got reworked, and that main building can be so disgusting sometimes with the windows it spawns. Like, Jesus Christ, like there's a chance for Father Campbell's Chapel to genuinely be like the worst main building in the entire game currently, which is pretty insane. But if you get good window RNG and you're playing a decent enough killer, it's a pretty good map. I think Clown. I actually kind of like Clown. He's on the weaker side, but he's not terribly designed. I don't mind going against Clown, and he's a bit of a guilty pleasure. I like Clown. And the perks this chapter were also pretty decent. Kate brought Windows of Opportunity, which is pretty solid. Dance With Me is not too bad. Boil Over's a bit annoying, but it's not crazy. Clown, I mean, Pop used to be really good. Now I mean, it's pretty shit, but like, there's not much competition, so I guess Pop's definitely a usable perk these days. Bamboozle's good, and then Colorphobia is kind of ass. But I think overall, the perks weren't too bad. The killer's pretty well designed, and the map's also pretty decent, so I think it was just a decent chapter. Next is Shattered Bloodline. This added Spirit, Yamoka Estate, and Adam Francis. Adam's perks are kind of shit. Deliverance is good though. Spirit's perks are they used to be good, but Haunted Ground and Spirit Fury really did fall out of favor. So her perks aren't the best. But as a killer, she's pretty good. I think Spirit's in a pretty good state. And the Yamoka map isn't horrible. It's got some collision issues with killers like Blight and Hellbilly. But in general, Family Residence isn't an awful map. I think I'll put it at the top of decent. I think it was a pretty good chapter overall, but the map's a bit lacking and the perks are a bit lacking. So, but yeah, I think decent would be solid for that. Darkness Among Us. I mean, I don't hate Legion as much as some other people do, but I think objectively this was just like a horrible chapter. Legion is not fun to go against. He's not very fun to play. He's not strong. Uh, Ormond was awful. Like this chapter used to be way worse. Like Legion used to be way worse to go against, way worse to play. Ormond used to be way worse. Um, but I think they kind of cleaned up this chapter a bit. Over well, I mean, it took about 4 years, but eventually they cleaned up. But I'm still going to say it's just in the horrible tier, just because Ormond is still a really bad map. Legion is just not a well designed killer in general. And only decent perk to come out of this chapter was Discordance. Distortion's a strong survivor perk, but I hate going in. I think it's just an unhealthy perk. Not because it's like too strong, but because it's just so boring. Running like, because I run a lot of aura perks. I don't really like to run slowdowns all much, so I run like lethal and barbecue and like aura reading add-ons and stuff. And when there's like one or two distortions, they're just completely immune to my auras, which I just hate going against. I just don't like. It's not a well designed perk. It's just a bit too good at what it does. It completely counters aura reading. When a guy has discordance, like you will not see their aura for the entire game, and so I just think Darkness Among Us. There's not much to like about it. It's like miles better than it was, as far as the content goes, but I still think the content's just really bad. So Demise of the Faithful is next. This brought Plague, Jane, and Temple of Purgation. Plague is okay. I don't like Plague personally, but I can't say she's a pretty well designed killer. Her perks are good. Jane's perks are kind of ass. The map is decent, so top of decent, I'd say. I know a lot of people really like this and think it's one of the best chapters, but I just don't really like playing Plague. I don't like playing against Plague. I find it quite boring. And the map, with the rework, made it worse, which has to get points taken off it, and Jane's perks are really shit. But Plague does have Corrupt Intervention, and Infectious Fright's also pretty good, so that gets points. Next is Ash. I'm just going to put this straight in the meh. It's Ash, that's cool and all, but these wee chapters I'm just going to put in meh, because they're not bad, but they're not good either. Not much to say about those. Ghostface, as a killer, he's pretty solid. He's went through quite a few changes. This added no maps either, and no survivor. His perks are okay. I'm All Ears is solid. Thrilling Tremors is decent. But it's just a very meh. I'll put it at the top of meh because mainly because of the lack of content. Uh, the content itself isn't really bad, but it's pretty meh. I think it fits in meh perfectly. Stranger Things. I'll say Stranger Things is our first good chapter. Um, yeah. So the map was terrible, but it's removed now. So it brought two survivors with decent perks. Inner Healing's okay. Fixated is okay. Renewal's not too bad. So we got some okay perks. Jolt for the demo is pretty good, but I think the best part about this chapter was definitely the killer. Um, I like Demogorgon, fun to play against, decently strong, and the perks overall are solid. So I'd say it's a good chapter. Nothing really negative about this chapter. Curse Legacy. I know people are going to think I'm a bit biased, but Curse Legacy is peak, in my opinion, is peak Dead by Daylight. Sanctum of Wrath, the map that I added, is really good other than the collision issues. It's actually one of the most balanced maps in the game, in my opinion. It's like a it's like a suffocation pit with less strong loops. So yeah, it's pretty damn solid. Oni is like arguably one of the best design killers in the game. He's really strong. He is really good at add-ons. Aesthetically, just really amazing. The only letdown of this chapter is the perks. Oni's perks are trash. Blood Echo is maybe okay sometimes. As for Yui, she's got some decent perks. Breakout's okay. Any Means Necessary is okay. Lucky Break is pretty good. But I just think the killer alone and the map really just bring this, chapter up. It added a good map to the game and an amazing killer. So I think it deserves amazing. The only thing that would have made this chapter better is if Oni just has some better perks. That's about it. Chains of Hate, I think maybe people are going to disagree, but I think this chapter was also amazing. Death Singer was one of the best killers in the game after his nerfs. I still like him. He's still strong, but obviously he's just a bit of a shell of his former self. But either way, I think this chapter was done really well. The map is good. I like Dead Dogs Saloon. There's a few problems with it. The main building is quite strong, and the breakable walls are pretty obnoxious. But other than that, it's a pretty well balanced map. The killer's really good, strong, fun to play. I like playing against Death Singer too. The perks, Serena's got some pretty good perks. Off the record's really strong, not too obnoxious to go against either. For the People's pretty good. I like that perk. It's well designed. Her other one's kind of shit though. Death Singer's perks have gotten quite a few buffs over the year. Deadmat Switch is pretty solid now. Gearhead isn't too bad, and even Retribution can find its use in some builds. So I think overall, like Chains of Hate was just actually a really well designed chapter. Good aesthetically, everything's just I like Chains of Hate. It was a good chapter, and a bit of a string of good chapters here with it coming straight after Cursed Legacy. Next is Silent Hill, which I think was also really good. I'm going to put Silent Hill in front of Stranger Things. Midwich is pretty mixed map. I like Midwich when I'm playing Blight or Dredge or something, but I hate Midwich if I'm playing Knight or Oni or a killer like that. So Midwich is really just it completely depends on whether I enjoy playing in that map or not. It just depends on the killer. Executioner was a really good killer. The perks were pretty shit. But I think what makes this chapter so good is just kind of the balance of everything. You the killer and the map, everything just kind of works, in my opinion. The map can be good, but it can also be bad. And then the killer can also be really good. I think he's one of the strongest killers in the game. I think he's fun to play. He's pretty fun to play against. Aesthetically, the chapter was done really well. Um, the only thing is probably the perks is just a letdown of this chapter, but I think it's still one of the best chapters they released. Next is The Stand Beyond. And once again, I might get a bit of shit for this, but I think Descend Beyond was one of the best chapters they added. At first, this chapter seemed pretty damn shit, but looking back on it, Jesus Christ, I would kill for another Descend Beyond. We got no map, but maybe that's for the best because maps are shit. The killer was probably the best designed killer they ever added, Blight. A very strong killer, very fun to play, very fun to play against, good add-ons, all that good shit, really fun. Aesthetically, like one of the best chapters thematically, in my opinion. Felix was cool. He brought some decent perks, built fast, desperate measures, two of my favorite perks to use as Survivor. Blight brought some decent perks, Undying, which used to be insane. Now it's just okay. Dragon's Grip was kind of shit. Blood Fever can find its use on some killers. But I think overall it was just a really well balanced chapter because we got no map, which means we didn't get a really shit map added to the pool. We didn't get a map added, but it didn't make the map pool actively worse. We just got a really good killer, a survival with some decent perks, a pretty good thematically chapter, and it just made the game better. I remember having, and most people, having the most fun playing Dead by Daylight around this time, and it was really fun. So I think it deserves to go in the amazing just because there was really nothing wrong with this chapter other than the perks maybe being a little bit on the weaker side in some aspects, and maybe Blight's add-ons being a little bit too strong. But other than that, I think this chapter was near perfect. Next is Binding of Kin, which I'm just going to put into the horrible. I don't think it made the game actively worse, but Binding of Kin brought a couple of shit perks and a shit killer. Twins, I think behavior were maybe just a bit too ambitious. They're they were buggy as shit. They still are buggy as shit. They got hit with weird nerfs and they feel just garbage to play. They suck to play against. Like no one can tell if they're really strong or really shit. I think Binding of Kin was just maybe a bit of a lesson to behavior to maybe just try and reel themselves in a bit. I think they could pull it off nowadays with more knowledge, but at the time when they made Binding of Kin, they probably just weren't experienced enough as developers to just handle like a killer like Twins because they just they're designed really poorly, and aesthetically, I just kind of hate the chapter. Nobody really likes the design of the twins and all that. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in the horrible tier. Next is All Kill, which I think I'm gonna put All Kill in here as well, just because no map, which is fine. Yunjin's perks are pretty shit. Trickster's perks are okay. Starstruck is okay on some killers. No Way Out's good, and crowd control's kind of ass. But I think Trickster, which is the main part, the game would probably be better off without him. He's just not very fun to play against. He can be feel so weak at times. He's impossible to play on console. So console players like you might as well not even have Trickster because he's impossible to play. I just think this game probably would have been better off if All Kill wasn't added. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it in the horrible tier because I think it was. Next is Resident Evil. Uh, hmm. Nemesis is solid. The perks that were added were pretty decent across the board. RPD is an absolute monstrosity though. It's my like without RPD, this map would have been in the good tier. But I think RPD just brings it all the way down to maybe just slightly better than Shattered Bloodline, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I like the Resident Evil chapter. It was cool. It's cool thematic. Like broke the game for a while, but it was cool. But RPD just absolutely, I'm sorry, it just destroyed this chapter for me. I hate that map with an absolute burning passion. So yeah, I'm just gonna put it in decent. Once again, just trying to ignore licenses as much as possible here. I'm trying to be objective. Hellraiser just brought Pinhead. He has some decent perks. He's a decent killer. Eh, you know what I'd say? Yeah, I'd put it in the decent tier. It's okay. Not much to say about it. He's fine. His perks are decent. Yeah, that's about it. Or of the Witch, I'm gonna put in kind of bad because it was a wee mid chapter, technically a paragraph, but she had a boon totems which I hate as a mechanic. So I'm gonna put her in kind of bad. Portrait of Murder, I'm also gonna put in kind of bad. It's probably better than some of these. Uh, Ivory of Crows got reworked. It's not as bad as it used to be. I still kind of hate it though. Artist is strong, but she isn't the best to play as, and she's definitely not the best to play against. The perks are pretty shit overall, except for Pain Resonance, which they get nerfed. Pentamento's not terrible, but I don't think that's enough to bring this chapter out the kind of bad. It just definitely could have been executed. I think this is also one of the worst performing chapters that Behavior ever added. So that's something to think about. This chapter just definitely could have been a bit better. Ivory of Crows could have been way better balanced. The artist could have been a bit better designed, and the perks definitely could have been better. After that, it was Ring. Ring was no map. The survivor perks were shit. The killer perks were actually decent and are now kind of ass. Merciless Storm's pretty shit. Good survivors will never miss the skill checks. Color Brown has been nerfed to high hell. It is awful now. And Floods of Rage is very overrated in my opinion. Sadako is just not a well designed killer. If you're not playing with her iridescent videotape, she's terrible. If you are, she can become so obnoxious to most teams. I'm gonna put. I don't think she actively hurts the game though. I'm gonna put her here, just because. Yeah, Sadako's just not a well designed killer, and the perks just weren't very good, and it was just a bit of a letdown of a chapter to be honest. So I'm gonna just stick it in the kind of bad tier. It wasn't horrible, but it was definitely just kind of poorly executed. Next was Roots of Dread, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed Roots of Dread. Dredge was one of my favorite killers. I like him. His perks are kind of shit. Harry's perks are kind of shit. But it's the map. It's the map that absolutely destroys this chapter for me. Garden of Joy is one of the worst things they've added. It looks and plays like a map from 2017. It's insane to me how Behavior thought that was a good idea to add that map in 2022 as well. Of all years, this map was added literally less than a year ago. Horrible collision issues, way too big, way too many loops, god windows in the main building, and just overall way too safe loops. Like without Garden of Joy, or if Garden of Joy was better balanced, I would have put this chapter in good. In fact, probably up here. But I think it's going to bring it down to just slightly better than Resident Evil because it's not as bad as RPD in terms of how fun it is to play, and I do prefer Dredge over Nemesis as a killer. So I think I'm going to put it just over decent. Next was Project W, which technically split RPD, added two survivors and a killer. So perks were okay. Superior anatomy, meh. Awakened awareness, meh. What's his other perk? I can't even remember, so it's probably shit. Terminus, meh. Ada's perks were okay. Wiretaps, fine. Rebecca added hyper focus and reassurance, which are two incredibly strong perks. I don't think they're busted, but they are very strong. It this chapter technically, I'm gonna count it as adding another RPD, but it doesn't increase your chances of getting RPD, and it did make RPD a little bit better. So I think for making RPD better and adding Wesker, which is definitely just a really, really good killer, I'm gonna put it at the bottom of amazing. Yeah, Wesker was really strong. Well, not really strong. He's pretty strong. He's really fun. He's not really fun to play. He's pretty fun to play sometimes, if you ignore some of the damn hitbox issues that this guy has. And he's fun to play against. Yeah, there's some good perks and all. Thematically, the chapter was also done pretty well. So yeah, I think it deserves to go in amazing. The only problem is just once again RPD, and maybe the perks could have been a bit better. Other than that, Project W was really good. Next is Force and Fog, and I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, alright? Because people hated this chapter. People hated Forged and Fog, but I really liked Forged and Fog. Alright, let me just go over it. Objectively speaking, the map Shard Square is not a balanced map. However, it's not irredeemable. Shard Square just needs to be made like 20% smaller and I have a few of the pallets taken out, and it would actually be one of the best maps in the game. The map doesn't have insane collision issues. It's not overly cluttered. It doesn't have stupid god windows. It's not like an indoor map that just be shit to play on. The only problem with Shard Square, it's a bit too big and there's a few too many pallets. But other than that, it's a pretty decent map. Looking at the perks of the chapter, Vittorio added Fogwise and Potential Energy, two pretty damn good survivor perks, but not overpowered. The Knight's perks, Knight added Nowhere to Hide, which is probably one of the best perks in the game and a very fun perk, might I add. His other perks, Hubris and Face of Darkness, aren't terrible, and you can fit them into some different builds. The killer itself is where like it absolutely splits the community. I really like Knight. I like playing Knight. I find him very fun. He's very strong. He's got decent add-ons. I say the only problem with Forest and Fog is the map is a bit unbalanced and the killer isn't very fun to play against. But that's it. Knight isn't very fun to play against, but that's mainly because when he came out, every big content creator said Knight is bad. The only thing he can do is 3 gen, and so everyone just watched the videos and said, "Oh, okay. So when I play Knight, I'm just going to try and 3 gen," which without actually thinking, for themselves and trying to actually play Knight and get good at them, people just 3 gen because that's what they were told to do. But Knight is very good. I never 3 gen with him. I don't have to. He's very strong. So I think Force and Fog, very controversial, but I think it was a really good chapter. But that's just personal enjoyment, and I think even looking at it objectively, I think if you looked at Force and Fog objectively, and you kind of put aside your hatred for playing against that one tunnel and night that you played against, it's not a bad chapter. The map is far better than maps like RPD or Garden of Joy, hell, even Area of Cruise. The killer is more fun to play against than, I don't know. Let me look at some killers here. I'd rather play against a knight than a pinhead. I'd rather play against a knight than a pig, and then a hag, than a nurse, than an artist, or than a twins. So I don't think he's that bad, and I'd much rather play Knight than most of these killers. I think Forest and Fog was a good chapter, and I'm going to get a lot of shit for it, but I think it was good. I liked Forest and Fog. What I didn't like was Tools of Torment, which I think is the worst chapter in the game. The game would be so much better off without this chapter. It's not even funny. Let's look at the perks. Survivor perks, all kind of shit, except for maybe Blood Rush. Killer perks, all shit. Killer power, shit, it's weak. It's extrememely unfun to play, extremely unfun to play against. Encourages 3 genning, which is the most boring strategy in the game. The killer aesthetically sucks. Nothing is good about this chapter. The music sucks, the visuals suck, the animations suck, the killer sucks, the killer's power sucks, the killer's add-ons suck. Everything about this chapter is like there's nothing good about it. The game would be far better off without Skull Merchant in it. This, and not to mention the change that they made to Shelter Woods, I've grown to thoroughly dislike. I don't like the shit they added to Shelter Woods. It looks kind of weird, but at the same time, it just adds like a few like decent windows and pallets to Shelter Woods, which if you were good at Survivor, Shelter Woods is just a very big map with good safe pallets, a couple of jungle gyms, and if you knew how to play it, Shelter Woods was actually a pretty damn good map for Survivor, and this just made it even better. So I think Tools of Torment was probably the worst chapter they have ever added, and honestly, it's by a long shot. Like I think Tools of Torment is genuinely worse than Original Darkness Among Us, and that says something. So yeah, this is my final rankings. You got the horrible tier, which starts with Skull Merchant, Tools of Torment, and ends in All Kill. We got the kinda bad tier, which starts with Flesh and Mud and ends with Portrait of Murder. These chapters aren't horrible, but they're definitely, had a few glaring issues with them. We have the meh tier, which is most of those paragraphs, and a few chapters like Saw, Ghostface, and Spark of Madness, where I think they were okay, but there was definitely a few things lagging. We have decent, where it was a pretty good chapter. It was definitely just maybe lacking in the perk department, or the killer just wasn't very good, or it was just really good, but it was let down by like a really bad map or something like Roots of Dread and Resident Evil. And then we have the good tier, where I think the chapters were good, but there's definitely a few things that hold them back. Like for example, Force of Fog, the map could definitely be a bit better, and the night could be more fun to play against. And then we have the amazing tier, where there's maybe a few small issues, such as Descend Beyond not having a map, Project W with the perks, Oni with the perks, Curse Legacy. But I think I'm pretty happy with my tier list. I know like there's a few controversial things, mainly being probably Saw, Ghostface, Stranger Things, Forest and Fog, and maybe Descend Beyond. I think those are the ones that people are going to complain about the most. But let me know what you think. Let me know your rankings, and thanks for watching.